Welcome to Bound by Books. I'm one of your hosts, Sherri Hayes, and I'm joined today by Marianne Maria.
Hey
How are
Cher,
you
how are
today?
you? I'm okay. How are
I am
you?
good. I'm good. I'm good. It's been a busy, busy day, but I'm good.
Yeah. You finished all your leftovers from Thanksgiving last week?
We did. We did. Yeah,
Yeah, we just polished off the last of ours too.
it was kind of nice to have those leftovers because then I could have days where I didn't have to cook. I could just pull out all the leftovers and put them on a
Yes.
plate and stick them in the microwave, and that was nice.
Yep. Yep.
That was nice.
Yeah.
That was very nice. But alas, we're back to having to cook again.
Yes. Yes. I know. Well,
Oh,
my husband is away on a business trip. So I
mm.
don't have to actually cook. If I want to have cereal for dinner, I can. So but anyway,
Oh,
so
yeah.
what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought we talked today about something that you and I know quite a bit about, and that's research. When you have plots in your or careers or what have you in your book that you want to do justice to, and you can't just make it up on the fly. You need to do some research.
Yep.
So we're going to talk all about our experience with research, which Marianne and I have quite a bit of experience with.
Yeah, in different avenues though. I mean,
Yes,
I
yes.
my research when it comes to my books, because as the people who are listening or watching may or may not remember, I write all things paranormal.
Hmm.
So of course, my research has to do with the mythologies, the existing mythologies, based on whatever paranormal entity I am courting at the moment. Um, but it also has to do with the fact that I put a lot of history into my books.
Yes, you do.
So my research not only has to delve into the things that go bump in the night and the different stories that we've heard, or tried and true mythologies, but also about if they're being set in a specific time frame, or if there's a specific time frame that is being discussed, I need to make sure that it's correct,
Hmm.
because that's a pet peeve of mine. I hate when history is misrepresented, whether it's in any
Hmm.
medium, whether it's in books or on TV or in movies. It will ruin a movie for me if it's wrong. It will ruin a show for me if it's wrong. So I stopped watching the because of it.
Especially if it's blatantly wrong.
Right. Right.
If it's just a little, artistic license here or there, I can usually overlook it. But it's like when it's something, it's just like, yeah, that wouldn't have happened. There's no way in this world that would have happened then, or
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it comes across as, that they just really didn't do the research, and it
Or
does
they
take you out of the story.
or they blatantly just don't care.
Yes, that's true. And see, and I write steamy contemporary romance and BDSM erotic romance. And so a lot of my stuff takes place here, which means I don't have to do the historical research. And I also write humans, so I don't have to do the paranormal aspect, but I have researched police officers and what all goes into the job, and legal and stuff. I even had to track down one time, I one of the premise for one of my stories, or the setup for one of my stories, behind closed doors, it's one of my steamy contemporaries, is that she kills her husband in self-defense, her first husband, and moves to a small town. Well, one of my as I'm going into this book, I'm like, okay, well, her husband was wealthy, so he would have had life insurance. Would she have gotten that life insurance?
Was she convicted or just accused?
Well, no, it was self-defense. So she, like, that wasn't in dispute. I mean, as far as that goes. But I was like, I was trying to find the research, and that was one of the hardest research points I have ever had to deal with, because nobody would answer it for me. I called insurance companies, I called agents. I was trying to find out, if this would be possible. Nobody would answer it. I ended up having to call.
Could you imagine if they thought it was
I
because you were
know.
trying to
I
pick their
know.
brains before you
That's
killed your
exactly what it
husband?
was. They didn't want to be liable if I was like, trying to find out. So I get like, should I kill my husband? And I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm an author. I'm really just trying to do research for this book. So I ended up having to contact a lawyer and get a hold of a person who did like estate planning type law, and find out from them if they would in fact get them,
What's
if
the
she would have in
answer?
fact have gotten the money. Yes, she would have. As long as she wasn't convicted of a crime, she would. If she was acquitted and if she was found not guilty because of self-defense, then she would have gotten the money. So but
Interesting.
that is one of, I will say, that is one of the hardest research conundrums that I have encountered in all of my years of doing this. But I do, so I end up having to do stuff like that. I've researched what it's like to be a firefighter. Yeah, it's and of course my BDSM stuff. I have there's a couple that I work with and run all my BDSM stories by, to make sure all of my BDSM lifestyle elements are accurate and things like that. But that's all research. I mean, you have to research. I mean, the stuff that you get into with that, I mean, I had to research how to do knots and, tie knots and, when, just all sorts of stuff. I mean, when to put spreader bars on versus when not. It's a whole big thing.
Huge difference about whether or not, when the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated. So,
Exactly. But it's both of its research. And
I mean, I have done a little bit of the, researching different things. Like I had to, my cozy mystery series that I'm still writing. I've taken a hiatus for about, I don't know, 4 months or so, 5 months or so since since the summer. For various reasons in my lifetime. I mean, if you're listening to this, I don't know if you know me and have heard that, my dad passed away. So there were some things going on where I just didn't have the emotional or the mental wherewithal to actually sit down and write. But I'm getting back into it now. And one of the things with the Cozy Mysteries is I had to research state troopers, and the difference between them and like a local sheriff, and who would have jurisdiction over what, because I based my I have a small island that's off the coast of Long Island, New York, where I have it's fictional, obviously, but it's still part of New York State. So I needed to figure out whose jurisdiction it would be under, because there are different individual state police barracks, but those barracks are under a larger purview, and I needed to research that. And I actually called my local state police, and I was just like, "Hi, I'm not a crazy. I need to know this. I'm an author." And I mean, the head dude was really, really into helping me, and it was on the phone. He didn't know me from a hole in the wall. So that was interesting. But, I also decided I was going to throw my hat in the ring for to do historical romance or historical fiction. I haven't quite decided yet because I'm still in the research. The books I have sitting on my shelf, where my bookshelf that I've actually started, took book one. It's like they're like six books deep, and we're talking chunky books, not like little pamphlets and everything. And they're all on different women in history, and their lives and lives and so forth. And one of them is Catherine de Medici. And it was funny because as I was doing this research, I'm like, wow, this is like the Serpent Queen. And it turns out that the book I'm reading is what the Serpent Queen on Netflix is based on now. So it's nice to know, but it's really hard when you're researching history, especially somebody who is an actual historic figure, is you have to, if you're reading something and it's not like a dry or like biography of this person, like a nonfiction, you have to, that's it, you have and what's been fictionalized and what hasn't. And because you don't want to take somebody's work that's been fictionalized, you just want to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff of what's real and what's been
Right.
fictionalized. And that takes some time and lots of notes, you know.
Yeah. Well, that kind of goes to the another aspect of research rather and because we've kind of been talking about researching situational type things in context to the story itself, but researching on genre to know what's acceptable. Tina Moss, another co-host for the podcast, she spent 2 years, she's discussed before, researching the sci-fi genre in order to before she started writing her alien romances.
Yeah. Yep.
So, that's important in researching, researching the genre itself, what's expected in the genre, researching covers and tropes and,
Correct.
all that kind of stuff. And it's, I still think it's kind of interesting because I still encounter a lot of people who are shocked by all of the back end stuff that goes into being an author.
Yep.
They
Yeah. You were talking about, that she had been taken 2 years. I remember Tina telling me that she had read like 150 sci-fi
Yeah.
romance books. And she and I have discussed in the past the difference between reading for pleasure and reading for research, because it's the way you can still get lost in someone's story if it's a good story, but you really need to pay attention to like for a romance, when the hero and heroine actually come in, they bump into each other, they come into contact with each other, the romantic beats that you're supposed to hit, according to what is needed for that specific genre.
Yeah,
So
every genre is different. I
yeah,
mean, that's important because if you don't follow the acceptable norms, you have to realize that you could have a hit or a complete miss.
right. Like I've been reading
So,
historic romance and historic fiction my whole life. It's one of
mm,
my favorite genres to read, and especially things that take place like in the Middle Ages or in the Renaissance, and so forth. Or if it has a little bit of paranormal in there, even better, like time travel, like
mhm,
Outlander. It's my absolute one of my absolute favorite series. But especially the part that takes place well in the past. The first book, Outlander, was one of my favorite books. So I think reading for all those years, you would think I would be an expert, but I was reading for pleasure. I never really paid attention to, okay, when did Claire and Jamie actually meet? When did their
mm,
relationship start moving towards, being thrown together to be married because they had to, because of forced proximity, which is a trope,
mhm,
to, when they actually started to fall in love with each other. So it's a
right.
and then all of the conflict that came in between. So it's deconstruction is a word that is goes hand in hand when you are researching a genre. It's deconstructing that book, and we've talked about that before. So
Yeah.
what are you currently researching now, or are you?
Um, well, I just finished a book, obviously just published it.
Yay.
So, that one I did more I concentrated more on my research was a little bit unconventional because I researched that one by watching YouTube videos, clips and stuff of the television show Flip or Flop
Oh, okay.
because my hero is into real estate, and part of that is he flips houses.
Okay.
And so that was kind of I wove that into the story as, how he what he does and how he comes in contact with one of the villains of the story, which is the heroine's boss. Um, so I had, but it, you know, again, I was watching, it is different from watching it for fun versus watching it for research, because when you're watching it for fun, you're not really paying attention to timelines that much, and you're not really paying attention to you know, the back and forth and how everything has to work together. And especially with, you know, they work on multiple projects at
Mhm,
one time.
mhm.
And, you know, so that was something, because I wanted him to have we working on multiple projects, because he's a wealthy guy. So I had to, once I started when I was watching it for fun, you don't pay attention to that. But once you're starting watching it for research, you're now watching and looking at that day 1, day 10, day 32.
Right,
You know, you're watching like, oh, well, we found this, oh, we found that, and we now have to repipe the whole house. And
right.
what's that going to involve? And, you know, and dealing with HEAs and you know, or not HEAs, sorry.
Yeah, HEAs, homeowners association.
Okay. My like
HOAs, HOAs.
HOAs. I knew I was wrong. I'm like, I know that's not right. It's close, but it's not right.
HEA and HOA to get to an HEA.
HEA. Exactly. See all those little these little abbreviations. But yeah, so you know,
Also
paying attention to all that.
how they deal with subs and things like that. And
Right. And when the
us,
design process, you know, happens, because I know some of that stuff from our, you know, from my husband and I's woodworking business and things that we deal with, but we don't deal a lot with remodeling. So that's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. It's next to my wheelhouse, but not in my wheelhouse. So just looking at that, but it is different. The way you
mhm,
approach it is
mhm.
different. And I'm sure it's the same way when you're looking at historical stuff, because, you know,
Well,
it's,
history's always been my thing.
Mhm.
It was not what I didn't major in it. I majored in journalism, and I have a background in English literature as well. But and I obviously have my master's in fine art. So getting a master's in fine art, even though I skewed more towards commercial art and graphic design and so forth to make money, I still had to study the fine arts. And studying
Mhm.
the fine arts, you still had to study the history of art, which is the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment and all of it. So
Mhm.
I fell in love with it. And because I love to travel so much, traveling to places where I can just immerse myself in the history of a place is one of my favorite things to do.
Mhm.
It's like I become part of that history because I feel like I just kind of absorb it as much.
Mhm.
But you're right, it's different. You're what you're researching is very hands-on and very meticulous in terms of like, you have to make sure you get it right or the house is going to fall down. you know your
Mhm.
fictional house and so forth. But
Right.
it's funny because regardless of what we're researching, whether you're researching flip or flop for a character who happens to be a real estate agent who may flip houses, or I'm researching Catherine de Medici, there's always going to be a reader out there who knows this topic inside and out, and they are going to call
Yes.
you out on it if you don't get it right. Or they're going to be like me when it comes to a TV show or a movie that either just blatantly Hollywoodizes something and just gets it
Mhm.
wrong for the sake of ratings because they don't give a crap. Or it's because they didn't do their research and they should get
Mhm.
turned off by it, and then they get off by your book. And that's something you don't
Mhm.
want. So
No, and there's really no downside to doing the research. I think that's an important note to make, because once you know the proper research, then you can, you know, the proper information, then you can choose to totally ignore it if you want to. But
yeah.
you can't, and you know, and go in a different direction or repurpose what you know and just, you know, whatever. But if you don't do the research and you just wing it,
Yeah,
you
it's not right. I mean, I have a
yeah.
in my book Collateral Blood, my vampire Julian was turned during the Irish potato famine, and I researched Irish potato famine pretty diligently, and I made sure that I knew who Charles Trevelyan was, who was considered the father of the Irish potato famine because he was so dismissive of the Irish people and their plight and so forth, you know, in British Parliament. So because he was such a jerk, I figured, well, you know, maybe he's also kind of a playboy. You know, if he's that much of a jerk, he's probably a jerk to his wife. So maybe he's got an illegitimate kid that he eventually acknowledges, kind of, you know, half-heartedly acknowledges, but still treats him like he's the bastard stepchild, you know, that type of a thing. And that's how I created Julian, is that Julian is Julian Trevelyan, and he is the illegitimate son of Charles Trevelyan. You know, and he has to deal with a lot of the atrocities his father had you know, sowed amongst the, you know, the Irish people. And I took it to the nth degree. You know what I mean? I
Of
did.
course.
You know? So I fictionalized him, and I fictionalized some of the things that were done, but they were all in the vein of this terrible time in Irish history. You know, so it all, you know, so it all fit.
But
So
I think that it really is another benefit to research, is it gives depth to your story, and it can even spark inspiration for your story to go in a different direction, or just plot points within the story that you already imagine or have already created. Diana Gabaldon, again, she's the queen of this. I mean, she does all of this research, and she takes, you know, she's able to work in historical figures into the plot points, set up subplots that either involve them or have them on the peripheral. So, you know, she's involving all of this, and she's actually using this to drive her story forward.
right.
She's using real content, real things that have happened or do happen, depending on if you're writing historical or if you're writing contemporary, to drive the story forward. Perfect example, when I was writing Burning for Her Kiss, my hero in that is a captain in the St. Louis Fire Department, and I contacted the St. Louis Fire Department and worked with one of their captains to make sure all the firefighting elements were correct, and not just for firefighters, but for the St. Louis, you know, department.
Yeah, because every department's different.
Right, every
Different
department's
hierarchy.
different. Exactly. So I was able to go like, okay, well, I mean, it was crazy. Their schedule is nuts. I had to have a calendar to tell me whether my character was working on a certain day or he was off on a certain day, because they have a 9-day rotation that they do.
Okay.
So with the 9-day rotation, it was crazy, because I couldn't tell when, you know, I had to figure out, well, when is he working and when is he not working? You know, if he's working, then he can't be going to the club, and vice versa. So, but I was able to, if he was working, then I had to figure out, okay, he's working. Am I going to show him at work? And if I am going to show him at work, then what is going on, and how do I use that to forward the plot? So whether you're writing historical or you're writing contemporary, you can utilize the situation that the characters find themselves in order to make your story richer and move the plot forward. And I think some authors they don't think they think it'll slow the story down if they do that. But I can't tell you how many people I had come, like, message me after I wrote Burning for Her Kiss and tell me that their husbands or their brothers or their dads were firefighters, and what I wrote was accurate. That was, you know, that was what they dealt with. That was true to life. And it really, to me, what author doesn't want to get a message like that?
Of course.
You know, it's worth doing a little bit of research to show some respect to whatever career or situation that your characters find themselves in.
I think also this kind of lends itself because, you know, like for me doing research into historic figures, the historic figures that I'm researching, they're all dead. I mean, they're part of their lives are done. They're part of history and so forth. and you're researching a firehouse and the rules and regulations that go along with that firehouse and their hierarchy, you're not specifying an actual living, breathing firefighter that's real. Your character is part of the firehouse, but it's a fictional firehouse, and it's a fictional character. You have to, which lends itself to the next question, being careful of libel. If you're going to use a character that's real and still living and breathing, and slander. So you have to be very, very careful with things like that, which is part of the reason why I haven't watched The Crown this year, this season, because even though Princess Diana is deceased, the other people, and the Queen Elizabeth is deceased, the other people in the show are still living and breathing, and they're still part of our world. Now, yes, they are public figures, so therefore they are quote unquote fair game. So, but I just have a feel, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth, and this is just a personal preference of mine.
Yeah.
When you take something like that and you fictionalize it based around historic things, but you really do it in poor taste. And I think this is being done in poor taste. But like I said, my own personal opinion. So it's like ripped from the headlines type of a lot of times with stories that people write about people who are still around. When is it okay? When is it not okay? When does it become libel? When does it become slander? These are things that you also have to remember, that if you're going to do research on on people that are still around, this is something you should probably run past an attorney before you go ahead and do it, because the last thing you want to do is to be sued, for something. Now, would it happen? Who knows? But I think it's important that you need to think about that.
Well, yeah, you need to know where the line is. I mean,
yes.
that's a very good point. And I will bring this up in relation. It's not authorish, but it was a situation that we ran into with our woodworking business, where somebody wanted us to build something that was going to pay homage to a very popular movie, or maybe franchise, I should say. And when he initially came to us, it was okay. Well, I want to build this kind of a theme type table. Okay, we should be able to help you with that. What do you want on it? As long as we keep it, we don't do trademark type stuff. And at first, it was fine, but then once we started signing the paperwork and getting into the details of stuff, they were wanting to add all this very, very detailed trademark stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like, nope. And so the first thing I did was pick up the phone and call my lawyer and say, hey, is this okay? Where is the line that we do? And my lawyer was like, I would advise you to walk away because, and you need to know that's so all of that was to say, when in doubt, consult a lawyer, because even if you have to pay for a consultation fee for a lawyer to find out where those legal lines are, it will save you so much headache in the long run, because you do not want to be dragged into court, years after, because that copyright doesn't go away. I mean, they own the copyright for like 75 years for things. So, you could be sued 10 years down the line.
Right.
And
the research also has to do with like people think about, okay, well, there's Jane Austen, and there's a lot Emily Bronte, and a lot of these, well, how do they do things like Pride and Prejudice and zombies, that type of a thing? It's because those books are in the public domain, and so that makes them easier to fictionalize and to, I guess, turn it into almost fan fiction type of a thing, Yeah, because it does kind of fall under the category of fan fiction, because
it's exactly what it falls under, is fan fiction. Although they don't call it that, they call it like reimagining is
Right.
what the catchphrase is these days. But it's fan fiction. You're
Yep.
taking the basic premise, the characters, and you're spinning your
Your own
own version
story.
of the story or an
Yeah.
alternate universe, like
Right.
Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies
Yep.
is perfect example of that.
Yep.
So yeah, you can
My
do a
book
lot with
Hollow's
it if
End.
it's not. Yeah.
I fictionalized, a lot of a lot of the storyline that was done
Mhm.
for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, because that's
Yeah.
Mark Irving was written in 1820,
Mhm.
and January 1st, 2023, all of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books enter
Mm.
public domain.
And you know
So,
those are going to be played with. You know
oh
they
please,
are.
they're probably scripts
Oh
waiting to
yeah.
pull the trigger for something
Oh
like that.
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I'm sure there's books too. I mean, not just like movie scripts, but I'm sure that there are books waiting in the wings. They're probably already written and
Mm-hmm.
they're just waiting for that date to hit so they can start releasing them.
Yep.
And, but again, you need to know that.
Right.
You need to do the research and find out what all your legal ramifications are, where your lines are before you put in all that work to write something that you know is going to cause you headaches if you publish it.
How do you categorize your research? How do you keep it all together? Do you do it per
Mm.
series? Do you do it per book? Like I have the dreaded notebooks that Tina and Danielle, the other hosts in our little mod quad here, uh, mod pod, they hate because I have stacks and stacks of notebooks with notes and so forth in it. How do you do yours?
Well, I do it per book. I don't as you know, I am a pantser, so I write by the seat of my pants. I have no outline or anything like that when I write. So I tend to do research as needed. When I was writing strictly professional, I decided to make my hero he was a former sniper. So I actually had to do research on his personality. What kind of personality does a sniper have? Like, what are some traits that they look for, an Army Ranger sniper? And the training and everything that went into it. So, yeah, I just kind of do I wing it. It's sad to say, but I do. Because again, I'm a pantser, so I don't always know the type of research that I'm going to need for a book before I start a book. So it just is when it comes up, it's like, oh well, yeah, I know that things like the flipper flop thing that I was telling you about. I was actually watching some of the videos on YouTube and I started watching them as I was writing the story. Like I just started writing the story and I was like, huh, he's in real estate. They're in real estate. This work? Can I make this work? So I started and then the brain flipped and I started watching it more critically from a research, with research eyes and ears. And I'm like, yeah, this will work. This
Oh,
this will work.
cool.
So yeah, you just things. But what I mean, I know like with your one book, Condemned, that I read, they you did a lot of research with the Knights Templar.
I did a lot of research for the Knights Templar, a lot of research about Jerusalem and the quarters,
Mhm.
the Muslim quarter, the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, and just all of the different uh, levels of history, like where what was built when, what was destroyed when, and then the Jordan Desert, and then the city of Acre, which is miles away from
Mhm.
Jerusalem, that where the Knights Templar had all of these underground tunnels,
Mhm.
and where they supposedly had a lot of artifacts that were now submerged. So there's and then besides that, I mean, with all of these artifacts and ruins underwater, I had to research
basically underwater archaeology, so because it's different than archaeology on the surface, with a
Oh
little
yeah.
trowel and your brush and so forth. It's different. So, but it's like, how much detail do you put in the book? How much detail do you not put in the book?
Yeah.
That's the other balance that you have to find, is when
yeah, because you don't want to bog it down. It's like what Danielle and I were talking about last week with the
devil in the
info
details.
dump. Well, with the info dump, you don't want an info dump, spend an entire page talking about a desert, unless you really need to know about that desert in order for it to move the plot along. So you have to balance it. I will also take that a step further and say, part of your research, if you are changing locations, you need to make sure you understand the distance between those locations. Years ago, I read a story that had a pilot flying from the West Coast to the East Coast and then back to the West Coast. And like only 6 hours had passed. And I'm like,
what?
Okay, I've flown from Chicago to Vegas and it was like a 4-hour flight. And you were going to like New York to like, I mean, it was on the West Coast. It was like Oregon or Washington or something like that.
It's a 5-hour flight.
And I'm like,
one way.
Yeah. Right. And
I mean,
supposedly they went.
There's a time change. You gain 3 hours when you go to the West from the East, but it's not enough to make it only 6 hours round trip.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm just like, but again, because the author didn't do the research, it pulled me out of the story because it made me go,
what?
What? Wait a minute, huh? So now I'm not focusing, as a reader, I'm not focusing on the story or the romance that's going on, the characters and their relationship. I'm thinking, wait a minute, huh? How did this guy fly from, all the way from one side of the country to the other and then back?
Unless it was one of my paranormals that has a portal.
Yeah, no, this was a contemporary romance. So no, there was no supernatural powers going on here. But again, little things like that, little details really can make or break a story.
Yeah. Yeah, they can. And it's like a dance. That's how I look at it. It's like a dance. You do your research, you have all of these amazing kernels of information that are just going to add such flavor to your story, and it's just going to make what you write just kind of pop off the page and give it validity, and because you've done this, and and now you have to finesse the more intricate steps of this dance by putting just as much detail as is necessary without overwhelming your reader, but at the same time making sure you're doing it correctly, and that you don't drop your pace of your story and the thread of your plot at the same time, because it's very easy to go down the research rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, very.
Yeah.
Very, very. Well, I mean, even the research I did for, the firefighting research I did, I probably only used maybe a quarter of all the information that I accumulated.
Yep.
But you want to have more information to pare down versus trying to, materialize something out of nothing.
I have started to use, and just recently started to use, like a color coding system where I will color code in yellow when I have my notebooks of my research and my sheets and things that I printed off from different websites and whatnot. And even in the books, I know I'm defiling the books by using a highlighter, but I'm highlighting what's important, what I feel is necessary for me to put in the book. And the things that are a little less necessary, that are more like flavorful, but at the same time, might be a little too much detail, but you might want to pepper it in here and there, I put in pink, and so it's like I at a glance, when I'm looking at my notes, I can see what is necessary for me to put in there and what is not.
Okay, so let's wrap things up with one more question here for both of us. What is the strangest thing that you've ever had to research?
Oh God. The genealogies of Sleepy Hollow, New York, as in the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and who connects to who. And, because like it was a small place, it was a settlement, during when the Dutch had occupation of New York, but everybody was kind of related to each other. And then how that history spilled over into when the British took over and we had the American Revolution. So that was one of the hardest. I mean, we're talking about mind-numbing genealogies, but you needed them because if I was gonna, because I wanted to do it correctly.
Right. Exactly. And it creates a world for your characters.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if it's done right, it pulls the reader in and it solidifies the world for them.
Yep.
Because it brings in realism.
Now, did I use everybody that was on that list of in the genealogy? No, but I needed to know who was it, how many generations certain things went back so that I could reference it properly.
Exactly. For me, again, I don't do paranormal stuff. So for me, strange, unique type of research was probably delving into the PTSD treatments for Brianna in my Finding Anna series. That was interesting because it amazes me still that we don't really talk a whole lot about, with all of the soldiers and stuff that have dealt with PTSD, that we don't talk really a lot about the treatments and the exposure therapy specifically that is used for most people experiencing PTSD for treatment. But when you dive down that rabbit hole and start like reading about it and learning how it works, it
could be very sad and disturbing.
It is. It's very emotional when you start doing that and then applying it to your character, or relating that and actually having, because I'm a very visceral writer. Like I immerse myself when I'm writing a character in like how that character's feeling and what they're experiencing so that I can put that on the page. And so when I was writing, Brianna going through this exposure therapy, I was having to be in her shoes. Like I had to be in her head while she's doing this. And it's very, very deep. But again, if I wouldn't have done the research and found out about all that, how all that works, and
it wouldn't be authentic. It would not
right.
be authentic. Yeah.
Right.
And I think in a situation like you just described, I mean, genealogies for me, it's like, yeah, if I get one of the Dutch settlers wrong, who's going to know? But with something like what you described, you have a responsibility to make sure that you portray it correctly, because otherwise you're doing a disservice to people who actually do suffer from PTSD. So that's where, when you're doing your research and whatever you're writing, this is why Sherri and I are talking about doing it correctly, and making sure that you're true to whatever it is that you're researching, because it not only will you be called on the carpet if you get it wrong, but with something like what Sherri was describing, it's important, it's very important.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know who, in my particular case, I've gotten so many messages over the years about people who have been touched, who say they've seen themselves in Brianna, or they've seen themselves in Stefan, or it's helping them move forward from a past trauma. I had one reader tell me that she's actually taken my series with her to her therapist, and when she's having problems and issues with articulating what she is feeling, she will sometimes be able to find in the story where Brianna is experiencing or feeling something similar, and she can read that to her therapist, and so they can communicate better.
Make a correlation.
Right. So you doing the research, I guess, kind of what Marianne and I are getting at is doing the research is worth it. for a variety of reasons.
Right. For
It is so worth
authenticity.
it.
Authenticity, you know, that maybe has a price tag to it in terms of how it can affect somebody who is suffering from a form of mental illness and needs to make sure that they feel validated, that you've done your job as an author to get it correct. But authenticity in terms of whatever it is you're writing, you know, whether it's authenticity in a recipe, in a historic figure, in a time frame, in a lifestyle. It doesn't, you know, you have to make sure that you do your due diligence. And that there are other ways of making sure you do your due diligence. If you're writing characters that are diverse, make sure you have your sensitivity readers, you know, to make sure, like you with your BDSM couple, that those are sensitivity readers. They're making sure that you're getting it correct, you know, and that you're doing their lifestyle justice, you know. So it's the same all the way around. So, and I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop for today. Although I will put this out here. If you're listening, go to the show description notes in below this episode on whatever platform you're listening to. And tell us go to the website and tell us what your favorite research topic was. Because I think we've shared quite a bit of ours. So we'd love to hear what your research topics are. What your favorite ones have been. But until next time, we will talk to you later. Have a happy week and a good week of writing. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.